I'd like to welcome everybody, and it's really great to see some new faces coming in the door tonight, particularly on such a brisk night. We all want to keep ourselves really warm. We want to go out, but it's just lovely to see you all here tonight. It's very special to me because we want to keep the Jung Society alive, and we want to have all these people coming in, and we love to have the enthusiasm of people coming. This evening, we're delighted to welcome back one of our own over here, our Jung Society committee member, guest speaker, society supporter, and also newsletter editor. So he's a pretty special man, the extraordinary John Gillam. Jung's interest in flying saucers is an effort to understand the complex working of our interior life, as this is revealed through the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are visionary rumours whose basis is an emotional tension having its cause in a situation of collective distress or in a vital psychic need, shedding light on the psychic compensation of the collective fear weighing on our hearts. John Gillam is a former technology innovative officer at the National Library of Australia. He's worked on the Australian National Satellite System, telecommunication management in Europe. And he's analysing foreign interference in Australian democratic systems and information dissemination and media projects. He's published a number of books listed on our website. So when we have a break at about 9 o'clock, and we have 15 minutes to get together and to say hello to people that we haven't seen for a while. And then we come back together for discussion. All right, here we are.
Thank you, everyone. Super duper. Well, thank you all for coming out on the cool night in beautiful Canberra. I'm sure it's the idea of flying saucers that's attracted some of your attention. The idea that Jung had written about flying saucers is equally attractive, and here I am to be the vehicle to bring it all to you this evening. Oh, come back just one minute, sorry. Just mind us while we have our own little game here with the slides. The evening is based around Jung's smallish book, there it is, on flying saucers, which seems in some ways strange that Jung would have got himself into this, but it's not the flying saucer story of little green men from Mars, who's landing, what are the flying saucers made of. For Jung, it's all about what the idea of the flying saucer does for us. What are we perceiving? What are we thinking? Where are we getting these ideas from? And Jung, I was surprised to learn, had quite a collection of clippings, newspaper clippings, articles about flying saucers. As remember, it was the end of World War II when Jung started writing about this, and flying saucers were in people's minds. So we're going to explore that in this evening. All of you have got a handout. There's a 10-page handout. It's in 2 bits. The front end is essentially a summary of what we're going to go through tonight. The back end is a summary of Jung's book. I can't put it all in 10 pages, but there's a lot of detail. I was quite surprised just how much detail Jung had gone into in relation to this phenomenon of flying saucers and what was being written about it, what people believed about it, and what it might be doing to society as a whole. So with that, I should say to the people, I'll talk directly to people on Zoom or who are watching the YouTube version of this talk. The handout that I'm talking about here tonight is available on the Jung Society website, free. Just simply download it and you'll have what all the people here in the room have got. Thanks. Well, talking about books that were written by Jung, there are different editions of it. And look at the price differential. I just did this the other day for a bit of what was going on out there. At Amazon, you can have the paperback version for 20 Aussie dollars. And on eBay, there's a whole collection of people selling the same book for 170 or thereabouts dollars. So it's a hot topic. Somebody thinks it is, at least, anyway. So let's get into Jung's view of flying saucers. Some of you might be aware of what we now call, well, flying saucers became UFOs, became UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. The Yanks are into that at the moment. I've stayed with UFOs or flying saucers because that's what was current at the time Jung was writing about this. UAPs is, well, it takes into, to the American usage, takes into account almost anything you see in the sky, from weather balloons and onwards, and for people trying to work out, is it the enemy or is it friendly or is it weather or is it military, and so on. So Jung's view of UFOs, as I started off by saying, it was not about little green men coming from anywhere in the solar system or the universe. It was very much a psychological, emotional feeling that he had about this topic. And of course, given his interests, that's what he was particularly interested in drawing out. So he noted, am I doing this wrong? I'm crashing here. He noted the widespread belief and fascination in UFOs and wrote about that in the book and associated articles. He said they were rich in mythological symbolism. So in typical Jung fashion, he had gone back into ancient history, Greek, Roman, etc., through Indian, Islamic, and so on, cultures, history, mythologies, and found repetition of certain themes. But when people saw things in the sky, what did they think they saw? And so Jung drew upon a very long, vast millennia, if you like, at least 2 millennia of human experience with this kind of phenomenon. Naturally, it had to do, Jung saw it as being with our collective unconscious. It's riveted in us. We have some feelings about these lights in the sky, if you like, and it's in some sense easy for us to attribute certain aspects to lights in the sky. You can easily separate stars, maybe planets, the moon, but if they move, then it starts to be something else, and particularly in the night sky where they're glowing. And of course, finally, Jung's view was that they were important psychological, they fulfilled important psychological needs in the society of the time, and that's particularly us. So more directly, Jung's view of UFOs are that they are projections of the collective unconscious. They are modern mythological symbols reflecting collective fears, hopes, and desires, and they're modern psychological mirrors that reveal the state of the human soul in the modern age. That's a very different aspect than what some people are writing about flying saucers, UFOs, and so on at the moment. You can see the psychological, emotional thinking that Jung was going through in all of his work, and it's all encapsulated in this one little book. Thinking of Carl Jung, putting him in the time scale. He lived 1875 to 1961. This book was in the last 3 years of his life. And he wrote it and issued it just after World War II and in the beginnings of the Cold War. So that 1945-46 type area. During his lifetime, at the end of his lifetime, there were quite a number of celebrated UFO sightings. And I've listed them here. The total bonanza one, of course, was Roswell. If you ever think UFOs, you somehow must get to think about Roswell and what happened there. That's the subject of a lot of conjecture, is exactly what happened and why was it all covered up. And then it got into mythology, it got into conspiracy theories, and it is part of our collective conscience, if you like. One particular story of a UFO landing in Roswell, and I'll deal with that a little bit more as we go on, look at some of the newspaper clippings that were probably read by Jung, because being an avid collector, both in English and in German, of clippings on UFOs, he certainly saw what we were seeing at the time in the newspapers. Just running down that list, 1952, Washington, DC, was a bunch of lights in the sky passing over the American Congress. In 54, in Italy, in daylight, a tubular UFO was seen by a whole lot of people. And we'll come back, and I've got some photographs of each of these. In 58, a Trinidad island set of photographs from Brazil, an island off the coast of Brazil. I'll show you the photograph. I looked for one that I thought was non-fake, because this is an area that, boy, are there some fake photos. 1958, the Monte Bisbino sighting, again in Italy, and then in 59, the sightings of flying saucers in the provincial areas of France. So let's go through some of those with the photographs. Thanks. This one is the classic Roswell, and I have to tell you, there is absolutely no photograph in the public domain of the flying saucer in New Mexico at Roswell. This one has been generated by AI, but is supposed to represent what they found. Yes, and if you think somebody was actually inside, think of the size of it. Anyway, that's a classic UFO crash site. And around that now is a whole mythology, a whole bunch of conspiracy theories where there are people who believe the Americans are holding back on telling us what really happened. And not too far down the road from this, there's Area 51. And you might have heard of Area 51, where supposedly aliens are working alongside of Americans. Well, I haven't gone into that, and neither did Jung at that stage. Here in the paper, the Roswell Daily Record, this is what the public was getting, and this is kind of getting into the collective unconscious. You're reading the headline there and you're thinking, how on earth did the RAAF get involved? It was the Roswell Army Airfield, because I had a, a second take on that when I read what on earth were the Aussies doing over there. That record, as the story goes, appeared the next day in the Roswell paper after the so-called crash landing, and then disappeared. There was nothing in the wire services. The American military had squashed the whole story. And then, of course, that just leads on to conspiracy theories and so on. Thanks. In Italy, yes, it is. You know, if you see a photograph that's black and white and grainy, there's a tendency, I think, for people to think that's not fake, that's real. But I'm not so sure that that's really true. There are on the internet a number of photographs or images of that exact satellite in exactly that, oh, not satellite, that UFO in that exact angle with those markings around the rim appearing in other photographs. So all I think I'm showing here is not that this is real, but rather this is the shape that has gone into our collective unconscious. If you saw that shape, you tend to go to think flying saucer. Yes, yes. Well, the word saucer, apparently there's an American journalist back around the 1947s who coined this phrase of the flying saucer, and that kind of went into our language. This one that's a known image that's been created of the flying saucers over the Capitol building in Washington, and this is a newspaper clipping. The thing that's just to bear in mind here, you're looking at this kind of fuzz around them. Now, a lot of photographs, images, illustrations you see tend to not show you that really sharp image of doors and windows and antennas, but the flying saucer tends to exist in a kind of a haze. Come back to that. The one in Italy that was seen in daylight, again, this is just an artist's representation from the local paper, a tubular length of a flying saucer. That also reappears in some sightings that have been noted. And this one, seemingly, people who seem to know about these things, or at least follow it, are okay by saying that's not fake, but that's as they saw it. It was a camera that took the photograph of this flying saucer over that island at the time. Again, see the saucer shape, the blob in the middle, the flat out going. There's something about that shape that we seem to have taken on board into our collective unconscious, which says flying saucer, because it kind of just seems to fit and repeat so many times. Here's another version of that same sort of shape over Scotland. A little bit weird, but taken by the UK's Air Force, and apparently true. Again, in America, a shape slightly different if you look at it, more top than bottom in this one, with the ring around the edge. And here, quite recently, last year, you might have yourselves even seen this newspaper story in New Jersey of 3 lights, fuzzy lights, hazy lights, drifting over New Jersey. Let's just hold that thought for a second, because that's a bit of a different representation to what we've been showing. Thanks. Just firstly, this little diagram is showing in the years 2022, 24, the number of sightings of UFOs, predominantly America, and even Australia. God help us, we apparently see flying saucers here and get recorded by the people who record these things. That's not official figures. There's a volunteers association that tends to keep these numbers. But I thought we didn't do badly. You've got America, you've got a bit of Europe, the red dot, and Australia, and then bits and pieces all over the place. And we're looking at the red dots. And here, a bit more on the shapes. this seems to be what the latest pundits who are talking about flying saucers and talking about what the collective consciousness is understanding to be a flying saucer. The sphere, there have been newspaper stories about spheres. The most recent one that I know of was last year over Canada, northern United States, and claimed to be, in the end, I think, a Chinese weather balloon, but was a surveillance balloon or something. But there were other people who said, oh, no, it's a UFO. Well, in the American jargon, that gets translated now as an unidentified aerial phenomenon, which kind of messes things up a bit. It puts too many different things together. And what we used to have a nice plain idea in our collective unconscious that a flying saucer looked like a flying saucer and we knew what that look was. And we could even attribute some attributes to it. Well, now things get messy. The rectangular shape, people have claimed to see it. It's these lights. You, in a night sky, you see the 6 lights, and occasionally people see the bit in between. If you drop your eye down to the bottom left, the triangle is another version of that. And the one we had, the news item where we had 3 lights in the sky, could have been one of these triangular devices. The other ones, well, over in the far right up the top, the saucer, and in the middle at the bottom, the so-called tic-tac, and alongside of it, the barbell. Well, creative imagination. It's, as Jung would say, we're creating modern myths of things seen in the sky. And some of us are going to call them UFOs. The physical characteristics of the UFOs, as Jung saw them, were that they're shining metal discs or spheres. And now we're talking about the people in his time, so we're talking 1947 through for 10, 15 years of observation. And this second one, enveloped in clouds or emitting vapor trails. A lot of the photographs that I was mentioning before have this fuzzy, hazy look around them. And you think, can everybody who has a Kodak Brownie or whatever camera they had at the moment, at that time, are they always making bad photographs, or are the things in the sky really so hazy and out of focus? And in my mind, I think when I look at the photographs, I think if it's hazy, it might be true. If it's far too sharp, it's got to be fake. And that's a bit on the crass side, I guess. But you know, how do we know? And they leave behind a metal ash. That's a Jungian expression all by himself. Apparently, if they have landed, the residue on the ground is a metallic ash of the people that Jung talked to or the reports that he read. That was noted. And then reminiscent of ancient god images. Well, this brings up the whole field of mythology, the collective consciousness of images and so on that we carry across the generations, across the millennia. So, you are so good. Here's one. If you've come in contact with any literature about ancient alien astronauts visiting Earth and helping early Sumerians, people in Mesopotamia and so on, there were these aliens who arrived, and they arrived in spacecraft of some sort. This photograph, this image from a church in Kosovo, that part of Kosovo was formerly Serbia, so it's sometimes attributed to Serbia, but in current parlance, it's Kosovo. That is said to be showing an astronaut, possibly an alien astronaut, but certainly a humanoid astronaut. And I'm blaming these conspiracy theorists for that interpretation. But Jung takes this type of image apart and says, but do you know anything about the people who created that image? It's a mosaic in a church, in a monastery, and it was done around the year 1350. And it's anything but in their rituals, in their theology, their religion, and so on. It is anything but astronauts visiting Earth, so I'm told. This is, it has to do with crucifixion, and it has to do with, I'm moving away from the poor people on Zoom, the moon and the sun. And Jung gives you a bit of an explanation as to the actual meaning to those people in Kosovo at that time, what they were actually seeing in that imagery. And it has nothing to do with UFOs, flying saucers, ancient aliens, and so on. I found that quite surprising because I've seen over the last few years that image gets repeated a number of times, and it's all about ancient aliens. And why is the astronaut, so-called, looking backwards? But that, in fact, has meaning with the crucifixion, resurrection, and so on within that culture. And again, in another culture, the Indian culture, these Vimana flying machines. People who write about conspiracy theories and ancient alien visitors to Earth will attribute these flying machines to technological knowledge given to humans from people from other planets, outer space, whatever. But the story behind the Vimana flying machines is much, much more detailed than that, and it doesn't necessarily have to relate to ancient aliens in their flying machines. I haven't got the whole story on that one, like I did the one from Kosovo, but it just goes to show that just because with our 2025 eyes, we look at it and we think, flying machine, different representation. It doesn't have to be. The people at the time when that was made, when those drawings were being put forward, the people who lived in the Indian culture at that time, and that's going back a bit, were representing something else. They weren't transfixed by the ideas of ancient aliens visiting Earth. So that's a build up to a good favourite of Jung's, the archetypal imagery. He did a lot of work on archetypes, and we're going to have a bit of a look at it. I found some of these, just a little bit of humorous. We'll get into them in the next couple of slides. Jung was struck by how UFO reports and stories resonated with archetypal motifs and mythological themes of celestial omens, gods descending from the sky, and supernatural beings. This suggested to Jung that UFOs were a modern manifestation of ancient psychological patterns. So he's drawing a long bow for us that our antecedents going back centuries, millennia, we've carried in the collective unconscious images, ideas, mythologies, and in each of our years, these citizens in their collective unconscious have the historical side and they have the present day side. So with our eyes, we see the technology of 2025. Man has walked on the moon. We have mobile phones, we have satellites, we have satellites that communicate, we have satellites that are used in astronomy, with telescopes in them and so on. We have a different world view to what people had all those many, many decades and centuries ago. But out of the archetypes, Jung, in this book, talks about three very important archetypes in this world of UFOs. The mandala, the wise old man, and the God King. Off the top of your head, you think, okay, I can get the God King. They come down from the heavens and bear gifts and knowledge and so on. That seemed to me to be okay. The wise old man, I'm working back up the list. Okay, knowledge that we don't have, that they teach us. But the mandala, I struggled with that, having my wife Kirsty's been well and truly into mandalas and how you draw mandalas. And I think, you know, the circle on the page and away you go, drawing a mandala into it. How did Jung get that? And you know, he was very big. If you read the Red Book of Jung, there's so many mandalas in that, and that are not like the way we do them at the moment. They're much more detailed and so on. Well, this is a mandala representation that someone has done to kind of give a cosmic view. So it's not the strict within a circle, although the circle's there, but there's a lot happening in that image. And Jung saw the circularity of the flying saucer as very, very deep within our collective consciousnesses, and very deep within the idea of wholeness. You know, when you're doing a mandala, you draw the circle, you encompass the whole within the circle of the mandala. Well, there's a representation. UFO as mandala symbolizes, this is Jung's words, our need to reconnect with the deeper, more unified layers of the psyche, the self, and the collective unconscious. I'm still thinking about that one. This one, I think it's easy. UFO occupants are imagined as wise old men being a Jungian archetype, representing a collective longing for spiritual guidance and enlightenment in an increasingly secular, rationalistic age. And the third one, the God King, he who comes from the heavens and rules. Well, you know, that's a story that fits so many cultures, so many centuries, so much Homo sapiens history. The archetype parallels the UFO phenomenon and ancient myths of sky gods descending to Earth in chariots of fire, a la Vimanas, or flying discs, a la UFOs, flying saucers, to satisfy our collective yearning for a higher transcendent order or intelligence. And you think he got all of that out of a book in flying saucers. Very Jungian this. So these three archetypes reflect Jung's view of UFOs as symbols of deep collective needs and a way to explore the mysteries of self and the cosmos. Well, thank you for riding that journey with me. In conclusion, as Jung would have it, UFOs are primarily a psychological and mythological phenomenon. I have to add to that, though, he does say in a newspaper, a letter to a newspaper editor, and you have it in your handout, the American journal, The Republic, which was started way back in Jung's time and is still going today. You'll find he says, I don't know what's in these flying saucers, but I don't discount the possibility there is something in them. But he was concerned with what, he was concerning with what we see, not what was inside. And finally, it's a reflection of the archetypal changes in the collective unconscious. So a Greek talking about this topic would be talking different to what we're talking today, because we've had that many more people, that many more civilizations have gone on, countries, thoughts, mythologies, histories, narratives have been built up by so many different people along the way. And Jung says it's an ongoing exercise. Every generation has its ideas. We're a generation that knows man has walked on the moon, that it's possible to fly off into space. The people way back in Kosovo, drawing the iconography of the man in what we see as a satellite, really isn't that at all to them. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you, John. Where are you? So we'll just go and have supper, and we'll come back and have questions and about that. So cups of tea in here, hot water, coffee, whatever you like, and there's a supper over here, and the toilet's out there. But don't run away, because we love to get to know some of the new people that have turned up tonight.
As to all of that, I think that in this era at the moment, 2025, our worldview is much broader, wider, deeper than at the end of World War II. The population then, which is what Jung was talking about, and the Cold War that followed on from 47 through until, what do we say, the falling of the Berlin Wall, the population was terrified, grief-stricken, diminished by war, the deprivations and so on. So their thinking is vastly different from our thinking. And in 100 years prior to that, I don't know if you saw balloons, the Monte Golfers in their balloons and so on over France, you were looking at the forefront of aviation and so on. So I think as we edge along as a society, I think Jung's work still stays with us in that it's a mix between what we physically see and what we imagine we're seeing, and what our collective consciousness allows us to see. And I think before we were talking about Project Blue Book and the Americans after the war, the way they ostracized people in a psychological operation, that if you saw a flying saucer, you'd go mad. And the population kind of disallowed you to think that, at least mouth it in public. So I think there are always constraints on any society at any time. There's always mores and ethics and so on. But I think in general, for the sort of thing we're talking about, flying saucers, I think we've got a much wider worldview than at least for the last few centuries. Mainly because we've got things like technology that keeps us all in touch. We have access to the internet, so we have a much greater depth of awareness and understanding of what's being written, things we can agree with or disagree with. Man has walked on the moon. We're understanding of satellites for communications around the globe. You know, our perspective has changed. But I still think that what Jung was cautioning is don't get too hung up on the technology or the engineering or the physicality of it. It's what we think is going on. Let me be outrageous and say something like Musk has this Starlink set of satellites going around, a couple of thousand of the things, very small communication satellites. It wouldn't take too much if you got into some sort of paranoia to think he's watching us. They've got records on us. They know where we are. And, you know, once the population starts to get into that fear for whatever reason, as the populations were fearful in wartime. And grief-stricken, for that matter, as members of their families were killed and so on. So things vary. I don't think it's a hard and fast answer, but I think we have the possibilities of having a wider view of an understanding that there's more than what we think we see with our own two eyes. Did that? Yeah, yeah. Can I just go to Sean there? I'll come back. Sean.
You know, I don't know too much about origin of UFOs, but the thing about being taken up is probes, and yeah, it's kind of like, you know, that when it goes that further step of, you know, I was abducted and they did these things to me, and you know, that requires the fact that that's kind of a, you know, an experience or a belief that delusional belief that is shared by a number of people, and you know, seems quite requiring of an explanation that goes a further step, you know.
Thank you so much for that question. Let's do a zigzag. Look, I can't blame Carl Jung for anything here. I don't think he has any answer for that. Except for maybe just to say, look, people are very susceptible to a lot of things. And if they're like the Project Blue Book, poo-pooing people who saw flying saucers or said they saw them as being mad, it's a manifestation of that sort of thing. Some people may be very heavy dreamers and they become very lucid dreamers. And if they then, because they've been thinking about flying saucers and little green men and from Mars and all this sort of thing, it may come to be part of their reality. And then we get the stories of alien abductions. But Jung was very careful in that book to say, but it could be real. There could be a true reality about flying saucers. He just couldn't pinpoint it.
Also, I mean, this is more about the nature of delusions than it is about the nature of UFOs.
Absolutely. Yes. Couldn't agree with you more. Did I sidestep?
No.
Thanks, Shauna. Jeff.
There was another Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer, who, one of his books, he put the phenomenon of abduction down to the theory that it was repressed memories of childhood sexual abuse coming through with the anal probes, etc. And I think there's some current research by neuroscientists into sleep at changing states of sleep that can induce strange feelings of such things.
There's also when you have sleep paralysis, and I've had it, you know, and a couple of times when I was younger, and had these experiences of sounds and everything, and really believed I was awake and couldn't move, and you know, so I guess things like that, sleep paralysis, where you can't, well, I can't think of the word, but where you're helpless, you know, so some kind of situation where you can't protect yourself from what's being done to you or whatever in those, you know.
Yes, yeah. From Jeff, I excuse me, I'd answer you in the sense that that's more Freud than it is Jung, what you were on about. and the Shona, the lucid dreaming can produce all sorts of feelings and sensations and knowings that people will simply know that they were taken by aliens because that's what their dreaming brought to them. and it's their reality. Lucid dreaming is like that, whether it's for good or bad or different. It can make up a lot of different things, which the person who has the lucid dreaming will truly believe that it was real, because to them it is.
Point is that this has been a contagious sort of delusion that it's been shared by us. You know, so it's been the delusion about being abducted has kind of got a contagion about it.
The delusion of being abducted is not really 80 about Scottish people in the 16th century who were abducted in fairy mounds.
Yeah.
And that's very similar to being abducted by a flying saucer. The same images, you know, they eat a certain food and they don't remember, and then they come back in 20 years. And it's not a new thing, I think. Yeah, but you know, it's not a new thing. In other words, the idea of being abducted. But what I wanted to say, and I think that the one thing that Jung would find similar to flying saucers in its archetypal images is our obsession with security. We have such an obsession with security. And I think that fills kind of that role. But I'd like to say that if you read the Canberra Times of June 1st, you find that flying saucers are not dead, as Jung saw them. There's something psychological, whatever they may be in reality. It's the interpretation they do.
Yes.
And
We've got that article just here if you want it from the Canberra Times.
yes, we do have it. But anyway, the former air chief, who's now
Come out here.
the vice chief of defense, Air Marshal Robert Chapman, has gotten into some trouble because he denied to, I think, Parliament and in general, he denied that the Australian Air Force was getting any information from the United States Air Force Agency of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. He denied it again and again. And finally, it all came out because of a leaked email. And then it became, then he had to admit, yes, that the Australian Air Force does get regular briefings from the American Air Force on these, these unidentified aerial phenomena. So you ask yourself, well, why? Because you'd think any Air Force, it's logical. They should deal with anything that you don't know in the sky. That's the job of the Air Force. So why was he so anxious not to let it be known that the Australian Air Force is interested in that? It's because I think
So for
there are no cases in the Air Force.
no, he doesn't. So he doesn't want to be responsible for saying that the Australian Air Force covers things up, which is what's implied if they are receiving information. And one of the things is that there is a lot of information sharing, especially around what happens at around the space station that's in the middle of the Northern Territory. And there are a lot of reported episodes in that area that are sometimes researched or primarily researched by the American forces that are in charge of that area.
Yeah, but I think the real problem is that it's still a powerful psychological force, flying saucers among us. And I think that shows it, that this sensitivity about taking it seriously. So it's still an important thing. So,
And I guess the person on the street would, when they heard that that was happening, you know, oh no, we don't have anything to do with this, you know, like America's getting all this information, but we're not worried about it. And then the person on the street would say, why not? Why not? Are you going to do it yourself? Or are you going to use, you know, information that's come? It's just,
yeah. Or would
I
they
can't
say,
believe it.
Would the person in the street, is there fear the person that would say, oh my gosh, there are flying saucers. They are from outer space. We're all going to be vaporized any minute now.
Well, there would be lots of different people.
There
on the
would be.
street. you know, but it's the ones who really, it's the ones who really want to know
Yeah.
that, yeah, that they'd say, well, why not? What's wrong with it?
But I think that Freud might say that this is all about basic drives and the need for mystery and to look for different things in life because we're naturally curious beings. And life would be terribly boring if you didn't reach out. Really. I mean, maybe we make up stories and we have these, they could be hallucinations. They may not be real, but then they could be real. So there's the big question, you know, in between, we're on the borderline. Is it real? Is it not real? And how exciting is that? Oh, gives us something to think about.
Yeah. Well, I suppose everyone saw the videos taken by US Air Force pilots a year or two ago showing the strange objects in the sky. It's very difficult to ignore.
It's very difficult to ignore. And maybe the phenomena are there, you know? Who knows? Unless we have scientific evidence. And at least we've got science now, but it's still limited.
So when somebody says to you, comes up in the street and says, do you believe in flying saucers? Your response has to be, I don't understand the question. You have to define what you mean. Doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
I got a question. Did Jung have any personal experiences or all the sightings were subject to his research? Did he have any personal experience of a flying saucer himself? Did he meet any aliens in his book, in the books you've
Yes. I'm not aware that Jung ever had an experience of seeing a flying saucer, let alone little green men coming out of them. He did do extensive research and had quite a library of clippings, journal articles. He was in touch with publishers, newspaper editors, journal editors. You'll see in the handout, he was in touch with the editor of The Republic at one stage, where he'd been invited to do a major article as The Atlantic. I say The Republic, The Atlantic, rather, magazine.
I was going to ask you to share that.
I was driving back from Griffith, the back way. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was something following me. It followed me for miles. And fortunately, I don't know if it was a UFO, but it was something in the sky, and it could have been anything. But I'll never forget that experience. I had to pull over because I was so frightened of the whole thing. It was one of those experiences I never forget.
Did it keep on going when you pulled over? Or did it stop with you?
It just kept on following me, you know. It was,
When you stopped,
Did it stop
pulled
too?
over.
Or did it keep going?
no, it kept going.
Stopped as well.
It kept going.
How big was the?
I pulled over because I freaked out, totally freaked
Can
out.
understand.
Yeah.
So when you got back on the road again, was it still up there?
No, it's gone.
That could have been a delusion or an illusion or. No, it didn't stay.
No, I wasn't on LSD or anything like that.
No, I'm not suggesting.
No, I'm just joking.
Was it a light or a shape or a light?
Pardon?
Was it a light? Was it at night? Was it a light?
Huge light.
It was
Very, very
it was at night and it was a big light.
It was an intense light, and I thought it was a moon car, but it wasn't because it was so intense. And it was just following me, you know. But when I pulled over, it just went.
Well, that would come under the category of unknown phenomena. And you have to be acknowledged for that. You have to experience that. No explanation.
But I've got a good imagination as well. But because I'm a writer, I write poetry, and my imagination can go right over the top of those sort of things. And I did write about it as soon as I As soon as I got back to Canberra, at about 3 in the morning. Yeah, it was a good experience, but it's something I'll never forget.
What's the reaction of, what's the response from people when you share that story?
Pardon?
What's the response of people when you share that story, or do you not share it? You're sharing it tonight because we're talking about it, but do you, if you share it with other people, what would be the response you get?
Oh, they didn't believe me.
That's right.
No, they just thought it was you. Because
No, they would think you're a weirdo. That's what they would think. That's because they're just being really rational. But you had that experience, and you probably remember it for the rest of your life. Not only will you have a memory of it, you'll have an emotional memory of it.
I'm very
Yeah,
emotional.
absolutely, yeah.
Very emotional. That's why when I pulled over to the side of the road, I stayed there for ages before I drove it, before I could drive on, just in case they came back.
Mm.
And I think the fact that you had that emotion
Hmm?
points to something new. The fact that you had that emotional response. You weren't just imagining something happened. There was a phenomenon that happened.
And yeah, it was a unique experience. That's why I'm asking if anyone else having the same thing. But there was no traffic on the road at all. Also, sorry,
Wow.
no traffic at all. It was 1 in the morning, and that road is usually pretty isolated anyway.
There's a
From-
back of Griffith.
Yeah, back at Griffith,
Oh, yeah.
Barrella, Airy
Oh,
Park,
yeah,
tomorrow.
Yeah.
How far from you it was and how it was?
No, because it's so pitched back. I wasn't going very fast. And, but it kept on plucking him down close to my car. And then-
Presence during that.
It's terrifying. Behaviour coming from that object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's why I asked if anyone else having a similar experience. I tend to do a lot of driving at night.
Yeah.
With my job. Sometimes I don't want to stay overnight, so I drive back to Canberra. Even though I get there back at 4 in the morning, just by the road.
Mm.
And yeah, that's my experience here. That was about in the 90s. And because I've read a fair bit about UFOs, and one of my first books was
No, the experience of UFOs, unidentified flying objects.
Not in the context of what I experienced, because it was grounded in the reality I was in at the time. I didn't go outside, I was just went outside my body and watched myself doing things.
Yeah.
That was a different context altogether. So no, I haven't had a kind of UFO experience at all, no. But I don't doubt that people have them. Just no explanation for it, that's all.
Was it big enough? Like you don't think it had, like, how big was it? And you don't think it had
It
sort
was
of,
huge,
it was huge, was it?
very big.
Was it loud? Was it noisy?
It's some sort of funny noise.
Funny noise?
And,
Sounds very real to me.
as I said, I wasn't going very fast. Scared to death. I had to stay there for a few hours before I moved.
You were that scared.
Having sort of been, you know, non-human beings in it, or do you think of it as sort of being controlled by humans, you know, like a drone sort of thing? Or I'm just wondering, in your mind, when you I believe you had the experience, and I'm trying to imagine what you think was the thing you saw big enough to contain beings in it. Do you have a sense that they were beings from somewhere else, or do you think it was the craft that you saw was being controlled like a craft, you know, like a humans controlling a craft? Do you have a sense that it was being from somewhere, or you just have, you know?
No, I've got no idea.
What do you think?
I got no idea what it was, but it was big. And I don't see the flying saucers as being small. I see most of them as being large, because if they're going to come to the Earth and become a part of society, you know, they'll bring the whole lot, everything down with them.
I don't believe there's intelligence out there, but if there was, we would just have to send something with you know, these little organisms that would totally wipe us out. You know what I mean? It wouldn't have to be in a big ship with human type organisms.
Maybe the freeze-dried versions come in the flying saucer.
So, but I'm not doubting your experience. I'm
No.
just saying, I'm trying to understand how big it seemed, and if to you it seemed to have like a human-like intelligence from.
It could have sucked up like you know, I could see it, and once I pulled over, they just left. Whether the movement of my car was one of their programs to, you know, to become a part of the Earth, try and find out what is this thing? What is the car? It's a moving car, moving thing. So I was so glad it disappeared anyway. But going further on that, how can we explain? I was talking before about how things have evolved on Earth, and you know, not necessarily from the ancient world, like the caveman with their, you know, loincloths and all that sort of stuff. So all of a sudden, we started discovering things like the phone, the electric light, and all the other space age stuff and computers. And it's got to be some explanation that aliens have somehow penetrated their lives into society.
What if they actually live in our society?
I'm not so sure we have element of from early times, where we had very primitive brains once. But not anymore.
There's someone over here.
Richard, it's Richard.
We did have, who was wanting to talk over here? Yeah.
Richard.
wanted to say
I just wanted to say one thing.
Yeah.
If did many people have you seen the 1951 film, The Day the Earth Stood Still? The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951 film. A long time ago. Well, it's available on the internet if you want to look at it. But the wonderful thing about it is it just illustrates everything that John has said. It's got a divine child in it. It's got the savior in it. It's got the God King in it. It's got all those things. It's a wonderful, yeah, it's the flying saucer that comes down, and all those things that you mentioned are there.
It's quite mythological then, it doesn't.
Yeah, but it's presented as something real, of course.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but I just recommend The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Richard, say again the name of the movie.
The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Stood Still, right.
Yep, by Robert Wise as the director.
Yeah, we'll look it up. We'll put a link on the website.
Yeah, and there's also a short story by Harry Bates, which that film is based on, called Farewell to the Master. And that's 1940, and it's available too in science fiction collections. But it's interesting because it's the same as the film, but in the film, the robot, who's the God King, I think, Jung would say. At the end of it, the robot is just seen as a robot controlled by the spaceman. But in the farewell to the master, the last line of the story is one of the humans says, "Oh, tell your master such and such." And the robot says, "No, you make a mistake. I am the master." And that had to be changed in the film because the censors objected to having anything other than God. And so they made the film take out that line. It's interesting. No, it's rather silly that virus. And inside of
Well, I was just going to say, I can see Madam President is standing up beside me. I want to thank you all for, you're a wonderful audience, an audience that can run Q&A by itself. It is a fabulous audience. Thank you all so much for coming and paying attention.
I just want to draw your attention for next month on Friday, the 4th of July. We won't focus on American Independence Day. We know we have an American day or their president, so that will be the day. But better than that, we have another known of our well-known speakers is Mr. Robbie Tulip, speaking about Carl Jung, spirituality and time. But unfortunately, Robert and I won't be around. The Vice President Kirsten and her team will do a great job in running the meeting. Robert and I are going to be in Tasmania that time. I'm going to a teachers' conference. I go around Australia with the ALIA Teachers' Conference. I've been around Australia with them, and it's our turn to go to Tasmania. And Robert's brother and family live there, so we thought we'd kill two birds with the one stone. And we have a friend who is an artist there as well, so we'll look her up. So we're just going to be away for a week, but we thought it's a bit unfortunate. The timing's not so wonderful. And of course, please consider renewing or join the society. You can look it up on the Canberra Jung Society, Canberra. See our membership benefits. If you're a member, you can get free access to the library, borrow whatever you want, and free entrance nights. And also, if you'd like to come involved with the Jung Society, join the committee. We're always looking for extra people to do the extra jobs, like setting up for the night and doing advertising, lots of different things. So, but thank you for those people coming, because you made our night a very special night indeed. So thank you, and we love to see you again. So don't be strangers. And thank you for the people that haven't been here for a while too. So that's really great as well. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you. We haven't had you for years, isn't it? And you haven't been here for years, and then now here you are turning up with your lovely books, your poetry books. So that's really special.
Yeah, with a view to purposely complete one. Yeah, definitely. I'd like to do. But I mean, would you like to stand up and say something now? Sure.
I think
My poetry also went on very young.
they want to.
And when I met this girl from the Jung Society in 1990, I had a spiritual experience because the love was so intense between us. And my poetry, as I said, I had a reading from a guru, and he said, your poetry has come from a previous life. And he said, you are going to write and write and write. without anything. No word of lie, it happens like that. But this is one of my books. I believe in the spiritual side of things, and Susan Hayward, my editor, said your book is like you have a problem in your mind and you want an answer. Close your eyes and whatever comes out, your answer will be there. This is a special spiral of art. Dreams to be realised, joy, rediscover, premise before birth, fulfilled beauty, incarnated, love embodied, world of spirit, eclectic spells, expand my being, acclaim knowledge into the brain, wild visions, African mystics, absorb into mythology, my face darkened, fiery marigold sunlight, doors sometime open in my dreams, past lives, future lives, open in clarity, open shut, glimpse of my mind invaded, black mind, enigmatic comprehension. I saw lies before me in space, language, distant hills, know things, never before learnt, Atlantic sculptural traditions, world of philosophies, powerful symphonies, resonated, composed passages, silent spirit music present in me, grow, swelling out, intuition, other spheres, planet, invasion of knowledge. Deep inside, I had a knowing of everything. Sweet colour, my spirit opens. I enter into wondrous chaos, marketplace, ironmongers, moneylenders, fish sellers, cloth traders, makers of magic, beggars, blind men, lost inside my dreams as I went deeper into a world of censored direction. Wandering lost roads off track, rutted pathways, roads that curved into themselves, into nightmares of streets, friendly Lebanonites of paths, crossroads calculated to go nowhere, world invented byways, tracks, endless desires, human beings, shortcuts, form of dreaming. World took me unintended journey.
Okay, thank you very much. That's wonderful. So we look forward to that. I think we bought the copies tonight, so we'll have them in the library so you can always have a look when you've got nothing, when you're waiting for things to happen around here. You can look in there. Yeah,
That's right.
okay.
There's
I guess we'd like to
234
give
of
this
them.
presentation to John. Thank you. This is something you can put away and say you've done it, done the job. And here's something, some naughty goodies here for you to say thank you, very special. Thank you very, very much for all your efforts. I know it's been a big job and you've come with very well prepared. Thank you for that special gift to us, to the Jung Society. Thank you. And thank you very much for the committee. There's Trish. She's really extended herself in the supper and also being there as a committee. And thank you to our committee members for being there for us and also for going and talking to Marianne, the lady that runs this place, to get a reduction on our payment. So we've been able to achieve that. So that's something that we've achieved during the week. So, so because everything is, as you know, is rising, the cost of everything. So we looked at other places to go and hire, and they're even more expensive. So we're very fortunate to be here. Thank you very much for coming along and joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you in the next month. You can have a look on the Jung Society, Canberra Jung Society, our website.
It's a central point of information as to what's going
Yeah.
on. Any last minute changes, anything like that, will be on the website.
And I'd like to extend a thank you to my cousin over there, Pam, for coming in and being at the door. Thank you for that. That's a really good job. And we really appreciate that. And as someone said to us, we're three of us 4 of us are in red tonight. And we're looking at the red book for the Jung Society Red Book and saying, well, we're in synchronicity tonight. And someone suggested maybe we should have a red book night where we all turn up in red. Something for next year. Okay, thank you very much for helping us to have a very nice night tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much.